he asked me two DSA questions. One debugging questions from JavaScript. So I also asked some questions regarding Git and GitHub. So he asked me to tell the unique features of blockchains. Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Pankaj and currently I am working in IBM as a software developer. So in this video I am going to share my interview experience and how I got selected in IBM as a software developer. So make sure you watch the video till end, and in case you are new to this channel, please subscribe to this channel. So now let's start. So basically the selection process has started in the month of October 2021. So in the October I have applied for IBM as a off-campus placement. So after 2 months, in the month of December, so during the start of the December only, I got email that my resume has been shortlisted and my interview has been scheduled. So now coming to the interview process. So basically there were 3 interview rounds. So one technical interview, one manager, and the third one is HR round. So now let's start with technical interview. So interview has been started with a brief introduction of myself, and after my introduction, so interviewer asked me to explain one of my project. So I explained one of my project which I have mentioned in my resume. So from the project he asked some questions related to technologies and tech stack which I have used in the project, and also asked questions like what are the challenges I have faced during the project, and what are the learnings, what are the unique features I have applied in the project. So he asked me to explain each and every features in the project. So it took around 5 to 10 minutes to explain my project, and after my project he moved to the internship. So I have mentioned one internship in my resume. So he asked me questions related to internship and also asked me to explain what are the things I have done in my internship, what are the duration of the internship. So after asking some questions from internship, he moved to the OOPS concept. So he asked me questions from OOPS like what are polymorphisms, difference between static polymorphism and dynamic polymorphism, and also about abstract class, as encapsulation. So regarding 4 pillars of OOPS. So you must know very well about the 4 pillars of OOPS. So he asked me theoretical questions from different concepts in OOPS like inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, and abstract class. And after this he asked me 2 DSA questions. So basically he asked me 2 DSA questions. So one was based upon balance parenthesis. So in this question he asked me to give the logic and explanation, and also asked me to run the code on online compiler. So I gave him the approach and wrote the code and run it on the online compiler. And after that, the second question he asked me was related to two-sum problem. So it was similar to two-sum problem, so which I have already practiced. So I gave him the approach and also wrote the code on online compiler. So this took around 25 to 30 minutes to implement these 2 DSA questions. So make sure you practice very well, that it will take less time to implement the code during the interview. So what happens if you don't practice very well, then you might get lots of error during the interview. So make sure you prepare very well, you practice on the coding contest so that you can easily code without any error. So after 2 DSA questions, he asked me one SQL query questions. He asked me to write one SQL query on Notepad, and after this he asked me some theoretical questions on SQL like difference between SQL and NoSQL, and what are the difference between truncate and drop commands, and such questions like DDL, data definition language, data manipulation language, give some examples of DDL and DLM, data definition languages, etc. So some questions regarding SQL. So all these questions were based upon my resume. So make sure whatever things you mention in resume, you should know it very well. So this round went up to 1 hour. In the last interviewer asked me to ask any questions. So I asked related to tech stack, which company used, his experience in the company. So this round went up to 1 hour and it got finished. So now after 2 days, I got email regarding my manager round. So after 2 days, I have received mail that my next round, that is manager round, has been scheduled the next day. In this round, there were 2 interviewers. So both the interviewer asked me to introduce myself in brief, And after my introduction, he started asking questions from my projects and internship, which I have mentioned in my resume. So in one of the project I have done on blockchain. So he asked me to tell the unique features of blockchains. There is lots of buzz regarding blockchain and what are the drawbacks of blockchain. So he asked me some cross questions related to blockchain. And after that, he asked me some questions regarding internship, which I mentioned in my resume, regarding like what are the difficulties we face in our team, how to work in a team, and what are the team spirits, leadership skills. Such questions he asked from the internship. And after internship, he asked me some DSA based theoretical questions. Like he asked me difference between array and linked list. So what are the difference between array and linked list, and operations like searching and deleting in array and linked list. So in which the searching and deleting will be fast. So make sure you prepare some DSA based theoretical questions. They can ask you even theoretical questions from DSA. And after this, he asked me one debugging questions from JavaScript. So I have mentioned JavaScript in my skill. So he asked me to debug one JavaScript code. So he gave me one code and he asked me to find the bug in that code. And he also asked some questions regarding Git and GitHub. So different types of version controls and about Git and GitHub. So in this round also, most of the questions were based on my resume. So as I have already told, so be confident with your resume. So mention only the things which you know properly in your resume, because most of the questions will be from resume. So whatever you have mentioned in your resume, they can ask anything. So make sure whatever things you have mentioned in your resume, you know it very well. So after 3 days, I have received email regarding my HR round. So this round was only for 5 minutes, and after this round, after 2 or 3 days, I have received another mail that I have been selected in a IBM. So this was about my interview rounds in IBM and how I got selected in IBM as a software. So now coming to tips and suggestions. So as you have already seen that there are questions from everything which I have mentioned in my resume. So first tip will be to be thorough with your resume. So whatever things you have mentioned in your resume, you must know each and everything in detail, in depth, because they can ask you anything from your resume. So first tip will be to know about your projects very well, prepare explanation of the project and different types of questions regarding the project. And second one, you should also know OOPS concept very well, because they ask questions from OOPS, even theoretical, as well as they can ask you to implement the code. So you must also know how to implement the code of OOPS concept. So because they can ask you to implement inheritance concept, so they can give you a scenario and they can ask you to implement the code. So you should also know how to implement OOPS concept. And the third one is SQL. So SQL is very important because they will ask you to write a SQL query, as well as they can ask you theoretical questions from SQL. So you should also know SQL very well. And the fourth one is DSA. So as you have already seen, they ask only maximum 2 questions from DSA. So most of the questions will be similar to what are the famous questions. So for DSA, you can follow Stiver's SDE sheet, because most of the questions will be from that sheet only. Similar to that, there will be a small variations. If you have done that sheet very well, then you can easily write the code in the interview. So most of the questions will be similar to that only. So I hope this video was helpful to you. Do subscribe and like this video. Thank you for watching.